consumer expert, and I'm here with Rita Perez, and we're going to talk about traveling and allergies today. So, first, let's talk to Rita. Tell us all about you, what you do, and then we can get into the conversation.
Hi, Amy. Nice to hear you. Nice to see you and be
Yeah.
here. Yay, we're starting off great.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rita M. Perez. I'm based in Orlando, Florida, and I'm a multi-passionate entrepreneur. And one of my businesses is in travel. I've been in travel since 2010, and I help other business owners get on different cruise ships around the world, taking their communities on board with them. So this can be just like a sun and fun, let's just get away all together. This can be like conferences and retreats that you plan together in a very unique venue, which is cruise ships around the world. And I say around the world because it's not the typical, it doesn't have to be the typical, let's go belly flop competitions and all that. There are luxury cruise ships and there's small ship cruising around the world too. And my kind of journey with eating with special dietary needs kind of started back in 2020, but really in 2021 when I started back traveling again post the heaviness of everything that happened with the pandemic. I have actually been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, since 2007. But it wasn't until the stress of everything that happened in 2020 that all my symptoms started to flare up. And I didn't even think that I really had symptoms at that time until then. And the thing that kind of like helped bring everything back in check was me doing like a very restrictive diet to see like what really was putting out all the flares. And so when I started traveling again in summer of 2021, it's obviously a little bit tricky because now you have to be more aware of what you're eating. And some places are really great for that. Some places aren't so great with that. So, kind of navigating the world with special dietary needs is critical because I need to eat to survive. And it's just tricky, especially when you're traveling to foreign countries.
Right? Yeah. No, like I'm very, my allergies keep me very strict. I mean, I
Mhm.
can't buy food at a grocery store. So for me, cruising isn't really an
Right,
option because I'm not trusting them.
right, right. And there's some ways to work around that kind of um like especially if we're talking about European river cruising, and there's things like that I've thought about doing for people who are like us, who are like very strict in eating and need to have special accommodations for that.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I wrote about in my, actually, I'm going to see if I can actually pull it up in my blog recently was that I talked about the different ways I travel, and I travel
Mhm.
by car, and why traveling by plane can be an issue, and thinking about like extended destinations. Like I would love to travel to Europe. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's no food on a plane I can eat, and the TSA won't allow you to take food, that safe food, into the airport. So that brings it to cruising, though, because I talk about cruising and how I don't do cruising because if I have to buy from a farmer specifically, I can't bring and take food from port to port. Is that right?
Right, because of the I don't want to say it's customs law, but it's I believe actually it is customs law because of things like fruit flies and things like that. They don't want them crossing like transatlantic, transpacific.
Right? Which makes sense. I get that.
Mhm.
So, from your point of view, not including me, because I am a super sensitive and it's going to be very hard for anyone to accommodate me. But when
Mhm.
people travel with you, what things do you tell them to do to prep to make sure they're eating safely?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty coincidental because this past weekend I went to the fresh market for the first time ever. I went with friends and then I went locally here with my partner, and I actually found I forget what the brand is, but they're like these veggies and they have like a little bit of additives and everything, but they're prepackaged veggies, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what was recommended so that I could have like fresh fruit or fresh food, produce available to me instead of having to like get all the different like chips and the crackers and things like that. But it's really one of the first things that I do, like when I'm traveling internationally, is I look where I'm going. So my last international trip was in Budapest. Now it was a European river cruise. On the river cruise, I'm not very concerned because they actually insert certain ones. I don't know if it's all of them, but one of my preferred lines actually doesn't have a freezer on board. And the nice thing about river cruising is that the chefs actually do get food from the port. So it's not like the massive ocean liner ships where they have to like put everything on board for a 7-night Caribbean cruise. It is every port they're restocking their stores like direct from the fresh markets. Like I remember in the south of France, we were at a port called Avignon, and we got to stop and do like a market tour, but that's actually where the chefs would have purchased like any fresh meats, any fresh produce on board. So that's why I'm like, there's some things that you can get around, but this specific trip that was on the Danube, it started in Budapest, and I was like, okay, I think I'm going to be eating with some friends outside in Budapest. So, what are the gluten-free, dairy-free options? And actually, Budapest does have a fully like gluten-free restaurant. There's a lot. I feel like it's easier sometimes to find things in Europe than it is here in the States that are
Uh-huh.
completely like either gluten-free or they're like more conscious about dietary restrictions. Like I was
Yeah.
talking with some friends this weekend about an ocean cruise line that still in 2023, I went on a ship inspection a couple months ago, and where they had us eating our lunch, and we're all like travel trade professionals, was a place that didn't have any gluten-free options. So I had to go to a different restaurant to go pick up food that had gluten-free options and then be able to dine lunch with the rest of my trade professionals.
Mm. Yeah, I understand. I actually
Yeah.
understand that one to the core.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredibly frustrating
Yeah.
in this day and age that there's not, and like for certain lines not to have certain, because I will say there's other cruise lines that have a specific gluten-free section on like different on their buffets. And
Yep.
so I'm like, I applaud those, but especially like going back to Budapest is like I'll do my research ahead of time to
Yep.
find where the places are. And
Yep.
then I also always make sure to pack snacks with me, because there have been times like even if it's accessible, you always want to treat here or there, and you're like, I don't know if I can get it or if it's going to be easier, if it's going to be hassle, so it's just easier to pack the snacks with you.
It when you can, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I do the same thing. It's like even eating here in California, I have to do research because so it
Mm.
sounds like cruising is the same. I've got to find the higher end cruise
Yes.
lines that are
Yes.
gonna actually do the shopping locally, where I
Right.
have a better chance of staying safe. Yeah.
Right.
You're not gonna find me on a big cruiser. Like
No, and it's funny because like as the years have gone by, I've also been like, oh, I don't know if I could do, because one of the benefits of cruising is that like you pay your cruise fare and all of your main dining is taken care of for you.
Yeah.
But on these mass market cruise lines, it's not the best food quality,
Mhm.
aside from taking consideration like special dietary needs. So if you wanted like really great nutritious food, you would have to pay separately in like one of the specialty dining areas, which I understand that concept. But at the same time, I'd much rather pay for an upper premium luxury experience if I know everywhere I'm going to eat is going to be able to accommodate me and has good quality food.
Right, right. And I think that's the biggest difference between the US and Europe is if they're part of the EU,
Mhm.
they recognize so many more allergens that they are more
Right,
cognizant. So
right.
finding a gluten-free place isn't uncommon, but in the US, you have to go, well, is it truly gluten-free? Because our
Right.
gluten-free parts per billion allowed is higher than the rest of the world. So there are people who
Mm.
are on the celiac scale that still can't eat gluten-free food if it's manufactured in the US.
Interesting.
So those are little things that we don't know about, right? So and the only reason I know is I have a friend who's a celiac, and when a certain brand came out with gluten-free pancakes, she ended up in the emergency room because their parts per billion is more than her body can handle.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so as a consumer, we have to know what's going on to protect ourselves.
Mhm. Right. Right,
So
and
just,
that's
yeah,
like,
go
you have
ahead.
to advocate for yourself is
Right.
the most important thing, and I know, like, sometimes I even will be like, "Oh, I don't wanna, like, make them feel bad," but at the end of the day, it's like either you make them feel bad or you don't eat. Like, one or the other, and I need to eat.
Well, and here's what it came down to this, because I've been dealing with this for over a decade now, is
Mhm.
people will say, "Well, my food is safe for you." And I'm like, "So if I die, you're okay with that?"
Ooh.
Because reality is their food actually isn't safe, but they don't understand the issues that come with people having food allergies. So,
Mm.
is there a way when you're traveling to know that who to talk to, of someone on board who is willing to listen if you go beyond the normal allergens? Like, d
Yeah.
is that a conversation you've ever had to have with someone before?
Yes, and I will say and I've had to have the conversation a couple different times. So usually like when I make my reservations specifically for cruising, because that's usually what I do,
Yeah.
I'm able to like say like, "Hey, I'm gluten free, dairy free." But usually, what they want you to do is on board is really to speak to the chef. And sometimes for larger cruise lines, it's usually like the maitre d' that you speak to, and you tell them what your allergens are, your dietary needs are. They'll write those down. They'll have you order off the regular menu, and they'll just adjust whatever the menu item is that you want based on those dietary needs. Other cruise lines, if I tell them I'm gluten free, dairy free, and I'm able to talk with the chef, they'll specially prepare things for me that are a side of the menu. And like that is a real treat. Like I remember one time on the one of my European river cruises, I was able to be like, I just want something with chocolate in it. Like, give me whatever dessert that has chocolate in it. And my server was like, I got you. And like the most delicious chocolate dessert that was okay for me to eat came out. But that's usually what it is. If you can talk to like a maitre d' or one of the head chefs that's actually in the kitchen preparing everything to let them know, and they'll usually record it. There's some cruise lines that will also be like, hey, these are our menus for tomorrow. They'll give it to you. You'll mark down which ones that you want to eat. And then they'll already know ahead of time, okay, we have to prepare this like a special way or make like a certain batch separate for these needs.
That is so amazing. It's so hard to find people that do that.
Yeah.
We're gonna need a list of those cruise lines.
Yeah. I know. I'm like, I now have ideas.
I just found another page for my webpage.
Right.
Website means good travel. These are the cruise lines to try.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's also just so having to navigate this. It's just baffling how certain things like gluten are in everything, certain things like sugar are in everything. And I think like that's also the frustrating part is like when you get to it, like the safe foods are really the basic fundamental foods. It's protein and produce. And it's throughout all the years, the centuries of time that all these different additives and preservatives have been added and the gums. And it's like if you just went back to simple basics, like this would not be an issue.
Well, and what's interesting is it actually didn't start till 85. 85 is when we started to see an influx of man-made ingredients. And then in the 90s is when it fully took over, which is why we
Oh,
started seeing so many people now with more allergies and more sensitivities, because we're not using natural products anymore. We're using the United States food industry is a science lab. So our grocery stores are the science lab for food producers to see what we can tolerate and what we'll eat.
I'm all about experimenting,
But don't,
not
but not in the
commercials
public.
though. I'm like, I'm all about a science experiment, but something that goes in my body is probably not the one I want.
Well, and that's where like my company comes in, because that's what I'm trying to do, is to help food producers understand how do you take this information of how you're making your food and make it more transparent, so people like
Mhm.
you and I can make safer decisions for our health. We're the hidden
Right.
consumers. No one makes. I'm allergic to corn and corn derivatives. There
That's
is
a
not
tough
a
one.
single company that recognizes those as allergens. So that means I have to read between the lines. I've done the research. I can do that.
Right.
Not many people can do the research the way I've done it. So, and then
Right.
like your case, like, you know what you can do. You're not a celiac, so you can handle things that are labeled gluten-free, but for
Right.
celiacs, they might not be able to. So they see gluten-free and now they got to see, where was it made? Oh, it was made in Canada. I can eat this product. Oh, it was manufactured in the United States. I can't eat this product. Right?
Right.
So that's where I'm coming in, and that's where I want to hope bring in and educate more people, so that people like us can actually buy more food. Right?
That's
Let me
that's
spend my money, please.
right. And that's I was again at the grocery store doing some shopping with my partner, and I'm like, of course it's like $5 extra because it's a special thing. And I'm like, I mean, I feel like the work that you're doing is so needed, and it will in the long term be beneficial. I mean, I
Yeah.
will give kudos. There are so many brands that are already on top of it. And I think about, so I'm here in Orlando. There's something that happens at one of the local theme parks, a Halloween party. And a couple years ago, I guess they started implementing, like, because you can do trick or treating every single year, but they started implementing like the teal buckets or teal tokens
The
so you
teal
can get
pumpkin
allergy
project.
friendly sweets. And so I was looking at some of the sweets, and like Enjoy Life is one of the brands. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a good one.
So here's what's interesting. To people who have my allergy, Enjoy
Mhm.
Life is a brand we recommend never buying.
Really?
They only reckon so the big problem is Enjoy Life only recognizes FDA recognized allergens.
Okay.
I don't have an FDA recognized allergen, so that is death in a package to me.
Interesting.
So
Well,
really, when they're talking about, so the teal pumpkin project is really only for those who have an FDA recognized
and that
allergen.
would be the top 8 or top 9, is that what they
Top
call
nine
it?
as of this year, because they recognize sesame seed now as an allergen.
But not corn?
No, no, the corn industry wrote the allergen statement saying that it's not possible to be allergic to corn or corn derivatives, which is not true. There's over 1 million people like me with a corn allergy, so it's
I
not
was
true.
like, corn is a grain, and lots of people are sensitive to grains, even if
Actually,
it's
it's
not
a
an
grass.
allergy.
It's
It's
a
a what?
grass. It's a grass. So I
I
have a
did not.
grass and a mold allergy, and most of our food is made from moldy corn, so moldy grass, and so that's why I get so sick from eating corn and corn derivatives.
Interesting. I have a grass allergy, so now I'm like,
If you're eating gluten-free, you're eating corn.
right.
So if your gluten-free is still affecting you, it could be either that the parts per billion are too high for you, or you might have a sensitivity to some of the corn ingredients. And that
I'm like
is
mind
where
blown
my
here.
research comes in, because that's where I had to figure out what's going on. Yeah.
Wow. And it's funny too, because I'm like, I feel like sometimes I feel like puffier, because really what I do, the restrictions that I have is to reduce inflammation,
Yep,
because
yep,
like that's what kind of makes all the symptoms go haywire.
yep.
And so like there's certain things, like I know, like if I drink and I've never been a big alcohol drinker, but I know if I drink wine or anything and it's like substantial, not just like a little tasting, my face will puff up, and I'm like, yep, this is just what happens. So I try and stay away.
We almost have to have another conversation, because I know we both need to get going. So When I realized the severity of my allergen, there were three things I refused to give up: wine, chocolate, and coffee. The
Mm.
amount of money I have to spend to keep those three in my diet, because I can't buy anything. Like, I live in Temecula, right? So I live in a wine industry area. I can
Mhm.
buy none of the wine in my area because they're all contaminated with corn or a corn derivative.
Wow.
Most of the wine I buy funny enough, comes from Total Wine, but I'm buying the imported wine. And I have to be very specific about which imported wine I can buy because, again, our derivatives have influenced the EU's food. So there's also more issues there. So, yeah, this is why I'm writing a book. So if you're interested to learn more about my book and all the ways our food is impacting our lives, inflammation, disease, and many other things, sign up for my newsletter. You'll get all the updates of when the book is coming out. It's getting a new name. There's a lot of big things happening around the book right now. So go ahead, sign up for that. Other than that, let's move on back to Rita. Rita, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. You've let
My
me on your show like, what, 2 or 3 times now? We've done, I'm like, I finally get to give back.
I love it because I'm like, oh, now I have so many ideas.
So if you are looking for someone to help you plan your next cruise, I highly recommend Rita. I was very jealous. She did a retreat for someone who they did a marketing cruise around Google My Business. And I'm like, oh, this was a couple years ago. I don't do Google work a lot anymore, but that was like, I would have loved to have been there to soak, well, a cruise. But that was such an amazing marketing topic around. So use your imagination. If you're having a conference, a convention, something you want to do something different to maybe increase attendance, a cruise line might be the way to go with Rita. So with that, Rita, thank you so much. I loved having you on here. People, go
Thank
ahead, everyone,
you.
leave your messages and questions in the comments, and we will get back to you. Have a great day, everybody.